workshop entitled Moving Through Loss. And as with any topic that I cover, we're going to be looking at it through the lens of self-love. Because let's face it, loss can be a major trigger. It can be a trigger emotionally, mentally, and or physically. And so it's really important for us to be in tune with how it affects us, or it can take a toll on us. It could take a toll on how we treat ourselves. It can take a toll on how we love and honor ourselves and how we stay true to ourselves. So there's a direct correlation with self-love there. And that's what we're going to explore. All right? And so I want to start by saying that loss looks many different ways. Right? So if we're talking about loss of a loved one, we're talking about loss of a loved one through their passing. We're talking about loss of a loved one through the ending of a friendship, right? Because we move on from different friends, as well as intimate partners, right? When we end a relationship or when we end a marriage, divorce can be devastating. A devastating loss, whether it's abandonment, somebody has left our lives. So loss of a loved one is very challenging, right? Loss of a job that we love, so an experience, if you will, something that we love doing, right? Loss of a job that we loved or loss of a job that we didn't love. It's still loss. And then also things, so loss of our home, our house, or a car, and all the ramifications of that, the effects of that loss or those losses, right? And it's important to understand that there's no rules on how you should feel about any of these losses and any that I didn't mention, and there's no rules on how long you should take to get over it. I think society sometimes says, well, the loss of a loved one is more painful and challenging than the loss of a thing. You could replace a thing, right? No, well, if it's my home, my house, my car, my A to B, how I get from A to B, no, it's significant. And so it's really important to understand that the way you process loss of any person, experience, or thing is unique to you. I really want you to have the freedom around it's unique to me. And nobody gets to tell me how I should do this, how I should move through this, right? Now, it's important to have some really helpful tips, and I will share that. But it's this whole idea of like how you should deal with it. I think sometimes it's like we're conditioned to be strong and like get through it, power through it, right? And that doesn't always work for us. Depending on what we've been through in our lives and how much that person, thing, or experience meant to us, it's going to vary. And you have that right. Okay? Really important. You're worth it. Okay? I remember when I was coming out of an abusive relationship, in particular one that went on for 2 years. And I finally had it. I was like, I'm done. I'm getting out of this relationship. And I did. And I was really proud of myself. And I was really relieved to not be in that vicious cycle anymore. But there were things that I absolutely missed. You're talking 2 years of my life. I missed some of the happy times, the times that he made me laugh. I missed the travel we did together. I missed the meals that we cooked together. There were some things I missed, valid. 2 years of my life. And so it was really important for me to have the space to process that, to work through the feelings, to allow myself to feel, and what does this mean? And, I may miss it, but maybe that's just information about things that I would love to have in my next relationship. That's how we process. But I needed the space and the time. And I remember having people in my life who had good intent, but they were like, why are you still dwelling on this? Why aren't you over this by now? Come on, get over it, move on. And I remember saying, you know what? I'm not ready. I will move through this at my own pace. I get where you're coming from. I know you care about me, but that's not how this works. So I say all that to say, not only to say that, it's unique to you, but also when we look at loss, we always think of it as like the loss of a good thing. But there's also the loss of something that perhaps wasn't healthy for us. But the fact that it was in our life, it took up space. You want to honor yourself and give yourself the time to mourn the loss, if you will. Again, we often affiliate mourning the loss with the loss of a loved one and their passing. But the same is true for when we lose anything, experience, or person, even if the people are still living, right? Divorce is challenging. The breaking up of your family unit is challenging. It's hard. Some of the stuff is just hard. And it's some of the things that are a reality of life. Some are within our control and some are not within our control. But they all get to be moved through in a healthy way. So important. When we move through it in a healthy way, that's when we're honoring ourselves. That's when we're taking care of ourselves. And that's when we're staying true to ourselves. Right? But there are some default behaviors. There are some ways that we deal with loss when it becomes too much, too painful, too hurtful, too uncomfortable. Yeah? So I want to go through those so that if that's what's occurring in your life, or if it has occurred, or if it does occur in the future, you can be aware. You can be aware that, oh, I'm doing that thing that Anita Ross said. All right, so we're going to start there, and then I promise you we're going to move on to those tips that are going to support you in processing loss in a healthy manner. Okay? So the first way that we default, if you will, is we avoid. When it gets too painful, when it gets too hard, when it gets too challenging, and oftentimes when we psych ourselves out a little too much about how hard it's going to be, and it might not even be hard yet, but it's going to be, we avoid. We avoid. Okay? I remember working with someone who was moving through the loss of a friendship. And she explained the scenario, and I talked with her, and I said, does this friendship mean a lot to you? Oh, no. I'm gonna get over it easy. It's gonna be fine. No. It's gonna be great. I'll be okay. And I was like, oh, okay, all right. Checked in a week later. I'm like, how's it going? Oh no, I'm great. I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful. And then 2 weeks later, I check in with her, and I guess there was like something that she normally does with her friend, and she was crying and in tears. And I said, what's going on? It's like, well, I miss my friend. And I was like, oh, good. And she's like, what? Like, good. At least you're honest with yourself, and you're going to go there. You're going to allow yourself to have the emotions. Because I was afraid you were avoiding it quite a bit. And when we avoid, we just prolong. We push the date out of when we're going to deal with it, when we're going to allow ourselves to feel. Yeah? So really important that we interrupt the avoiding. Yeah? What are some of the ways avoiding looks? Avoiding looks like isolation. So avoiding people, not being in a space where someone can ask you about the loss, or you can talk to, you don't want to talk to anybody. Can look like isolation. So putting the distance between you and anyone that can possibly support you. Avoiding looks like busying ourselves. This is a really one that humanity is really, really good at. Because the thing is, oftentimes we're busy with a lot of good things, right? I think of parents who are just busy with taking care of their children, right? Or people who are doing really important work in the world. Go to work. I got to go to work. Or people who are spending time with their loved ones. We busy ourselves. And some of it's meaningful busyness and some of it's not. Sometimes we're doing video games or watching too much TV and and all the things that we could dive really deep into to avoid having our feelings and processing the loss of a loved one or the loss of something we really cared about. Yeah. So busying ourselves, even though sometimes we're up to good things, if we're doing it to avoid dealing with stuff, it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy. And just a side note, when we do that, when we're busying ourselves to avoid, we often run ourselves down because we can't outrun the pain. It's like my friend who 2 weeks out started crying. We're not going to outrun it. It will at some point come up. All right. So avoiding. So take stock into what are some of the ways that you avoid, and when you do that, maybe try to look at, well, why am I doing this? What's going on for me? And you might find that there's something you're avoiding processing. Okay. All right. Another way that we handle loss, or like when we default, when we experience loss perhaps triggers us, is we fall into what I call outdated patterns, which are just habits or behaviors or ways of thinking that we've outgrown and that no longer work for us or serve us, but creep up sometimes. And one of the ways outdated patterns are triggered is through loss, right? I can think of, like, I'll give an example of, we might be doing really well. We've broke some habits that don't work for us. We've made some, changes in the way we think and the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about life. And then we lose a loved one, a parent, right? That either loved us or that we didn't have a relationship. It can be equally as detrimental. And perhaps the way that we deal with that type of pain is drinking or doing drugs, right? Or any addiction. We just fall into that. I'll just have a drink, make the pain go away, numb it out. That would be an example of slipping into that outdated pattern. Because perhaps that's how you dealt with it in the past, but you knew that no longer was working. You had made progress, but it happens. All right? Especially when it's something so challenging. Or I've also worked with people who have lost their home, and as a result of losing their home, started drinking. And I want to paint the spectrum, because loss is loss, and it gets to be handled in a healthy way. All right. So again, I try to give the example of a thing that we lose and a person that we lose, or an experience that we lose, because they're all equally impactful, if you will, have the ability to impact us, to sway us, to affect us, to have us slip into a behavior that no longer serves us. But right now, it's going to feel good in the moment. It's going to help me through this moment because I don't want to feel this pain. And I don't want to process it. And I don't want to go there. Have you ever been there? It's like, I don't want to go there. I'm not going there. Just shut it down. If I shut it down, it ain't coming back. I have to tell you, it comes back. It comes back. And then the other way that I want to talk about, with like a default as a result of loss, is we get stuck. We can get stuck in that pattern of avoiding. We can get stuck in that pattern of slipping into old behaviors or ways of thinking. And that is not only a frustrating place to be in, to be stuck, but also is a sign that this has gotten out of my, like I like to say, area of expertise. When I'm stuck, I know it is time to seek support. Right? And what does stuckness look like? Stuckness looks like feeling one particular way all the time. Maybe it's sad, or maybe it's angry, or maybe it's, indifference. not being able to make decisions, ambiguity, you name it. But being stuck is like being in one sort of mood or feeling all the time, that or a big majority of the time. That's being stuck. It give you information. Oh, I might be stuck. Stuck could be being in a rut. So like a routine that bores you or that is even detrimental to you, right? So for me, it was being in that abusive relationship. So sometimes we get stuck because we don't want to, we avoid and we slip into these ways that don't work for us anymore because we just don't want to deal with the loss. And it's at that point when you notice these things that are happening in your life that are just like you're not moving forward, that it's time to get support. All right? Because the way that you're working through this isn't it. You're not working through it. Okay? So I say all that to say, and I wanted to share those just again so that you can get an idea of like how it might look when loss might be too overwhelming for you. When it might be too much for you to take on, where it's too scary, too uncomfortable. All right, those are just some of the defaults, if you will. There are others, and I'm sure you might be able to think of them. But I wanted to share that to contrast that when we decide to process the loss at the point of when it occurs, we can start the process and then move through it. And there again is no time that you time limit. You can take your time. Okay? And so that's where I want to give you these 5 powerful tips on how to do that. Okay? All right. If you're a note taker, grab a pen and paper because you want to take these down. So the first one that we've spent quite a bit of time on is to process the loss in a healthy manner. Okay? And again, you can see that takes, however long it's going to take for you. And what does that mean? When the moment that you are become aware that you have lost that person, experience, or thing, it's at that point, one, becoming aware and being in tune with how you feel about it and your emotions and your thoughts, right? Because all of those combined have the ability to run away from us. Run away from us. So it's really important to be conscious. Well, what am I thinking here? Am I thinking about what has occurred, or am I thinking about down the road what this means, or am I am I avoiding or am I not wanting to feel my emotions? Processing in a healthy manner, which simply means allowing yourself the space to feel, allowing yourself the space for your emotions wherever they go, without judgment, without shoulding yourself, without being highly influenced from others, and from society. Well, I remember this rule about like when you're in a relationship, you have up to half of the time that you were in the relationship to heal from it. And I used to say, okay, well, I have half the time. That's a lot of time. But the truth is, it could be less and it could be more. So processing in a healthy manner, again, is free of judgment, free of things that, ideas and thoughts that are not yours, right? Is giving yourself the space to feel and for your emotions to move wherever they go. What do I mean by creating the space? I mean that could mean not being around people that might should you, right? Or that might mean if it's your own inner conversation, having those shoulds be off limits, right? It might mean being around only loved ones that can support you and that will just be there for you and that will just listen. All right. Those are just some ideas of how to create the space. Some people go all in and light candles and play music and or take walks, but create the space for you to move through it in a healthy manner, to move through those emotions, to process those emotions, to feel what you feel, have what you have, experience what you're experiencing with no judgment, no rules, no shoulds. Okay? I really want you to land that, the importance of that. And so step 2 goes right in alignment with that, which is recognize you have the freedom to take as long as it takes. Again, we tend to be conditioned. We have to be strong. We have to go out there and do the thing. But if you're hurting, how are you going to do that? And I think there's a fine line, right? Because there are some things that we do get to do in life to survive, to tend to perhaps any dependencies that we have, people that depend on us. But for the most part, you want to be conscious of taking off the burdens off your plate, taking the burdens off your plate so that you can have the freedom to take as long as it takes. I think sometimes humans, we think it's a sign of weakness to say, "Oh, I can't do it. I'm still moving through this grief. I'm still mourning this loss." That's not weak. That's doing the hard work, right? The easier route is to avoid. The easier route is to go do it anyway, even though you're suffering inside, suffering silently. Or the opposite of silently is suffering and letting people know about it. So doing it with resentment, grudges, and like, I'm going to go do it anyway. So do yourself the favor and understand, have that freedom that it's going to take as long as it takes, and relieve some of the burdens on your plate that you can get to later, or that you can have ask someone to handle it for you. So 1 and 2 go hand in hand, creating a space and understanding that space. You have the freedom to be in that space as long as it takes. And remember that other people's comments about how you should do it, well, you are their father, you are their mother, you should go do that. Be mindful of how much you allow of that into your conscience. Because a lot of it is based on these ideas that are really antiquated, that are outdated, that we should just pack it all on and go do it and avoid the pain and and go do it anyway. A lot of that is based on erroneous, outdated ideas. The truth is, we own our strength when we honor ourselves and allow ourselves to move through those feelings and take as long as it takes. Does that make sense? All right. Number 3 is make a conscious choice to heal. We don't want to skip this step, and it's an important step in any healing of anything, whether it be loss or whatever it is. You do get to make a conscious choice. Okay, I want to heal. I want to heal. And when you make that conscious choice, then that officially, if you will, starts the process. You move through the feelings and the emotions into the healing. And this is where forgiveness happens. This is where deeper work will occur of, processing, thinking, okay, so what does this mean now in my life? What does no longer having this person or this thing or this experience mean in my life? And why is it impacting me so deeply? You're going to start asking yourselves those questions. And why does forgiveness fall under that? Because oftentimes when we experience loss, there is a feeling of either I played a role in it or someone else played a role in it. And so you want to look through that lens to say, is there anything here for me to forgive? I remember speaking with someone and they said that their wife, who had cancer, chose not to do any Western medicine solutions for trying to rid her body of the cancer. She tried Eastern, which is more natural and is a beautiful way to approach healing our body. But her partner didn't agree. And she wanted her to do whatever it took to heal her body. Wanted her to do both. Let's do Western and Eastern and do our best to get you out of this. And she ended up passing away. And it was devastating. And the person I was talking to and coaching was moving through a devastating loss. And at certain points was feeling like she gave up on them. And she didn't want to be with me. And had some deep forgiveness work to do around, forgiving her and having any resentment or feelings that they had. So forgiveness work is a critical piece of healing. And so you want to look through the lens of, is there anyone or is there anything within me that I want to forgive? So that I can release myself from the emotional attachment of that and move on. Okay? So that third step was to make a conscious choice to heal from the loss. The fourth piece is to recognize what you've learned about life and what you've learned about yourself. So I shared a couple examples earlier where to look at, like, okay, so I like these aspects of the relationship. I did like to travel. I did like to cook together. That was fun. But I've learned that, and I'm going to parlay that forward into my next healthy relationship. So what have you learned about life, and what have you learned about yourself? Oftentimes when we're able to get those lessons, we find it to be helpful. We find it to be raising our vibration, if you will, around even thinking about what it is we lost. Okay? So you want to glean all the lessons about yourself and about life. Super important. All right? And again, that has us shift out. So we've already kind of moved out of the emotions of it, but shift out of the sadness or the anger or the resentment or whatever we're feeling into, oh, here's the gift. Here's the gift I have from this. Okay? All right. And then the fifth one is establish a new normal. Let me say that again. Establish a new normal. Things are going to be different. Things are going to be different. We've lost the person, the thing that really means a lot to us, the relationship that really means a lot to us, the job or the experiences that meant a lot to us. And so we get to establish the new normal. What is it going to look like now? And the one thing I like to really encourage folks to do is dream out loud. Dream as big as you can around how this new path forward is going to be. All right? Don't be afraid to do that. Don't have any guilt around doing that. Be liberated in, okay, I have this opportunity. I've moved through all of this pain and this process and this inner work. Now it's time for me to establish how my life is going to look and who I'm going to be going forward. And it can be a really fun space to be in. But I will guarantee it will not be a fun space to be in if you shortchange yourself on any of those other steps. Okay? Because the one thing that gives us a lot of information around whether we have processed loss in a healthy manner and have processed it in an effective way is if we feel pain or suffering anytime we think about the loss. So if there's still some residual stuff there, then go back to those other steps and see where you may need to pour into yourself a little bit more. Because again, establishing that new normal does get to be fun for you. Okay? So those are the steps I have for you. I hope that this lends itself to some aspect of your life where you can grow and you can use these guidelines either now or going forward. Have an amazing day.